I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my designer dress one last time. The reflection showed a woman I barely recognized anymore. 8 years of marriage to Michael had shaped me into someone different. Someone who now felt trapped in a life that seemed perfect on the outside. The party at Blake Sterling's mansion loomed ahead of me. I knew what I was about to do would change everything. Michael thought this was just another Silicon Valley social event. He had no idea it was the beginning of the end. "Are you ready?" Michael called from downstairs. His voice, once so comforting, now felt like chains around my neck. "Coming," I replied, grabbing my clutch. The drive to Blake's mansion was silent. Michael was probably thinking about his latest software project. He was always thinking about work these days. I remembered when we first met at Stanford. He was the brilliant computer science major with big dreams. I was the ambitious marketing student who believed in those dreams. We built everything together, or so I thought. But somewhere along the way, I became invisible. Blake Sterling understood that feeling. He saw me when Michael stopped looking. The mansion came into view, its lights sparkling against the Bay Area night. My heart raced as we pulled up to the valet. Blake would be waiting inside. The plan we had crafted together was about to unfold. Michael helped me out of the car, ever the gentleman. If only he knew what was coming. The grand foyer was filled with Silicon Valley's elite. CEOs, venture capitalists, and their perfectly polished wives. Blake appeared almost immediately, champagne in hand. "Michael, Ashley. So glad you could make it." His smile held secrets only I understood. Michael shook his hand, completely oblivious. "Wouldn't miss it, Blake. The new startup looks promising. Business talk, always business talk." I drifted away from them, mingling with the crowd. Emily and Chloe, Blake's carefully chosen friends, approached me. "Everything ready?" Emily whispered, sipping her champagne. I nodded, my stomach churning with anticipation. The next hour passed in a blur of small talk and forced smiles. I watched as Blake masterfully worked the room. He was everything Michael wasn't: present, attentive, alive. Finally, Blake gave me the signal we'd planned. It was time. I walked over to where Michael stood with some investors. "Can we talk?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. Michael excused himself, following me to a quieter corner. "What's wrong, Ashley?" "Everything," I wanted to scream. Instead, I looked him straight in the eyes. "Do you even see me anymore, Michael?" He blinked, confused by my question. "What are you talking about? When was the last time we really talked?" "We talk every day," he said defensively. "No, you talk about work, about your company, about everything but us." The room had grown quieter, people starting to notice our conversation. Just as planned. "Ashley, this isn't the place, Dash." "It's the perfect place," I cut him off. Blake appeared behind Michael, right on cue. "Is everything all right here?" Michael turned, irritation flashing across his face. "This is private, Blake." "Nothing's private anymore, Michael," I said loudly. The room was definitely watching now. "Ashley has something to tell you," Blake said smoothly. Michael looked between us, realization slowly dawning. "What's going on?" "I'm leaving you," I announced, my voice carrying across the room. The silence was deafening. "And I'm not just leaving," I continued, the words burning my throat. "I'm leaving you for Blake." Michael's face went pale. "This is a joke," he said, looking around the room. "You're joking." Blake stepped closer to me, his arms sliding around my waist. "It's not a joke, Michael." The room erupted in whispers. Michael's hands clenched into fists. "How long?" he demanded. "Long enough," Blake answered with a smirk. "You're nothing but a workaholic who took his wife for granted." Michael lunged forward. Without thinking, I slapped him hard across the face. The crack echoed through the room. Someone gasped. Then the laughter started. Cruel, mocking laughter that bounced off the mansion's walls. Michael stood there, his cheek red from my hand. The look in his eyes would haunt me forever. But I couldn't stop now. "You never deserved me," I said, the practiced words tasting like poison. Blake's friends raised their glasses, toasting our moment of triumph. Michael looked at me one last time. I expected anger, rage, something. Instead, I saw something worse: heartbreak. He turned and walked away, his shoulders straight despite the humiliation. The party continued around us, but something had changed. Blake kissed my temple, whispering, "Perfect performance, darling." I smiled, ignoring the voice in my head screaming that I'd made a terrible mistake. The next few weeks passed in a blur of lawyers and paperwork. I moved into Blake's mansion, leaving behind the life I'd built with Michael. The tech world buzzed with gossip about our scandal. Blake reveled in it, while I tried to convince myself this was what I wanted. But late at night, when Blake was asleep, I'd think about Michael's face. The way he looked at me that night. The way he'd looked at me for 8 years before that. Blake was different from Michael in every way. Where Michael was focused and serious, Blake was spontaneous and exciting. He threw lavish parties, introduced me to important people. Made me feel like I was the center of his world. But sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, I'd catch glimpses. Glimpses of something cold in his eyes. Something calculating. I pushed those thoughts away. This was my choice, my new life. I had to believe it was the right decision. One morning, I overheard Blake on the phone. "The Anderson account is almost ours," he was saying. "Once the divorce is final, we'll have everything." Something in his tone made me pause. I listened closer, my heart beginning to race. The wife was easier to turn than we expected. My blood ran cold. Just like the others. Others? I waited until Blake left for a meeting. Then I started searching. His office was locked, but I knew where he kept the spare key. Inside, I found files. Dozens of files. Each containing details about couples. Successful tech couples. With a sinking feeling, I opened the first one. Sarah and James Patterson divorced 2 years ago. James's company bankrupted shortly after. Blake had acquired it for pennies on the dollar. My hands shaking, I opened another file. Lisa and David Chen divorced last year. Same pattern. Then I found our file. Pages of notes about Michael's company. About me. About how to drive us apart. The room spun as I realized the truth. I wasn't special. I was just another target. Another wife turned against her husband. Another piece in Blake Sterling's game. The sound of a car in the driveway made me jump. I quickly replaced the files, locked the office. But the damage was done. I couldn't unsee what I'd discovered. Couldn't unfeel the horror of my own naivety. What had I done? What had I helped Blake do to Michael? And more importantly, what was I going to do about it? The weight of my decisions crashed down on me. I sat in Blake's pristine kitchen, surrounded by luxury. But all I felt was trapped. The woman in the mirror wasn't just someone I didn't recognize anymore. She was someone I was starting to hate. That night, I couldn't sleep, the files haunting my thoughts. Blake's arm around me felt like a snake constricting its prey. I slipped out of bed, wandering to the massive windows. San Francisco's lights twinkled below, oblivious to my turmoil. I needed help, but who could I trust? Emily and Chloe were Blake's pawns, just like I had been. My family had distanced themselves after the scandal. Then I remembered Sarah Chen, the private investigator. I'd heard whispers about her in tech circles. She was known for exposing corporate fraud. The next morning, I made an excuse about shopping. Blake barely looked up from his phone, already losing interest in me. I met Sarah at a small coffee shop in Palo Alto. She was younger than I expected, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. "Mrs. Anderson," she said, "or do you prefer Sterling now?" The name made me flinch. "Ashley is fine." "What can I help you with, Ashley?" I told her everything. The party, the files, the pattern I'd discovered. She listened without judgment, taking careful notes. "You're not the first," she said finally. "What do you mean?" "I've been tracking Blake Sterling for months." My heart skipped a beat. "There are others investigating him?" Sarah nodded, sliding a folder across the table. "Including your husband." I opened it with trem. Bling hands. Inside were photos of Michael meeting with Sarah. Meeting with other investigators. Building a case against Blake. "He's not just sitting back and taking it," Sarah explained. "He's fighting back." Tears blurred my vision. Even now, Michael was handling this with quiet determination, while I had acted on impulse and emotion. "What can I do?" I asked. "Help us," Sarah said simply. "We need someone on the inside." The idea terrified and thrilled me. "Blake will suspect something." "No, he won't," Sarah assured me. "Men like him never suspect their victims of turning the tables." She was right. Blake's arrogance was his weakness. I agreed to help, knowing the risks. Sarah gave me a secure phone and instructions. "Document everything," she said. "Every conversation, every meeting." "What about Michael?" "He doesn't know you're helping yet." "It's better that way." I returned to Blake's mansion with renewed purpose. Playing the role of trophy girlfriend while gathering evidence. Blake never noticed the change in me. He was too focused on his next conquest. I watched him work, noting every detail. The calls he thought I couldn't hear. The meetings he thought I didn't know about. Each piece of evidence went straight to Sarah. Weeks passed, and the case against Blake grew stronger. But so did my guilt about Michael. I saw him occasionally at industry events. He looked thinner, harder somehow. But his eyes still held that same quiet strength. Blake loved parading me in front of him, showing off his victory. Each time, I wanted to scream the truth. To tell Michael I was trying to make things right. But Sarah's words held me back. The element of surprise is our advantage. Then came the night that changed everything. Blake hosted another party, celebrating a new acquisition. Michael's company. I watched in horror as Blake announced the hostile takeover. Michael stood in the crowd, his face unreadable. Blake raised his glass in a mocking toast. To new beginnings, he smirked. The room applauded, sheep following their shepherd. I felt sick to my stomach. Later that night, I called Sarah in panic. "He's going to destroy everything Michael built." No, he won't, she said calmly. Because tomorrow, we strike first. She explained the plan. It was time to spring the trap. All the evidence we'd gathered would go public. But first, I had one more role to play. The next morning, I approached Blake in his office. I found something interesting, I said casually. His eyes flickered with interest. What's that, darling? I handed him a fake document Sarah had prepared. Information about Michael's new software patent. Blake snatched it eagerly. Where did you get this? I have my sources, I smiled. He didn't question it. Just like Sarah predicted, his greed blinded him. Within hours, Blake made his move. He tried to use the information to manipulate stock prices. Not knowing it was all a setup. The SEC was waiting for exactly this kind of proof. I watched from the bedroom window as federal agents arrived. Blake's face as they led him away was almost worth everything. Almost. The media exploded with the story. Tech mogul Blake Sterling arrested for fraud. Pattern of corporate manipulation exposed. Multiple victims come forward. I gave my statement to the authorities. Turned over all the evidence I'd helped gather. The other wives Blake had manipulated reached out. We formed an unexpected support system. But still, I couldn't face Michael. The damage I'd done felt too great. Sarah kept me updated on the case. Blake's empire was crumbling piece by piece. His friends abandoned him just as quickly as they'd mocked Michael. Justice was being served. But my heart remained heavy. Because the person I'd hurt the most, the person who deserved the biggest apology, was the one person I didn't know how to face. Michael Anderson, the man I'd betrayed. The man who fought back with dignity while I fought back with shame. The man I still loved. Even if I'd forgotten that for a while. 3 months after Blake's arrest, I finally gathered my courage. I asked Sarah to arrange a meeting with Michael. She chose a quiet coffee shop in Mountain View, away from the tech scene's prying eyes. I arrived early, my hands shaking as I ordered tea. When Michael walked in, my heart stopped. He looked different now, stronger somehow. The hardness in his face had softened slightly. But his eyes still held that same quiet intensity. Ashley, he said, sitting down across from me. Just my name, but it carried the weight of everything between us. Thank you for meeting me, I managed. Sarah explained your role in bringing Blake down. His voice was neutral, carefully controlled. I'm so sorry, Michael. The words felt inadequate, but I had to start somewhere. I was blind, stupid, and cruel. He studied me for a long moment. Why did you do it? The question I'd been dreading. I felt invisible, I whispered. You were always working, always focused on the company. Blake made me feel seen again. Or so I thought. Michael's hands tightened around his coffee cup. I wasn't perfect, he admitted. I got caught up in building something. But I never stopped loving you, Ashley. Tears slid down my cheeks. I know that now. I let Blake manipulate me into destroying something precious. He manipulated a lot of people, Michael said. But you helped stop him. Only after I helped him hurt you. The silence between us felt heavy with unspoken words. I started therapy, I said finally. I'm trying to understand why I was so vulnerable to him. Michael nodded slowly. I've been seeing someone too. Working through things. Another silence, less heavy this time. What happens now? I asked. I don't know, he answered honestly. I can't just forget what happened. I'm not asking you to. But maybe. I hesitated. Maybe we could try talking sometimes? Just talking. He considered this, his expression thoughtful. I'd like that, he said finally. We spent the next hour just talking. About the investigation. About Blake's other victims. About the changes in our lives. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. Over the next few months, we met regularly. Sometimes for coffee, sometimes for walks. Each conversation peeled back another layer. Revealed another truth we'd both been avoiding. I learned about his loneliness during those work-focused years. He learned about my feelings of inadequacy. We talked about how we'd both contributed to our breakdown. Though nothing excused my betrayal. Blake's trial began in the spring. I testified against him, looking him in the eye. His smug smile was gone now. Replaced by the desperate look of a cornered man. The evidence was overwhelming. Multiple counts of fraud, manipulation, corporate espionage. The jury took only 2 days to reach a verdict. 20 years in federal prison. After the sentencing, Michael found me outside the courthouse. Are you okay? He asked. I nodded, watching Blake being led away. I feel free, I said. Free from his manipulation. Free from my own mistakes. Michael touched my hand gently. The first real contact we'd had in months. We all make mistakes, Ashley. It's what we do after that matters. His words gave me hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. Not to what we were before, but to something new. Something built on honesty and understanding. One evening, as we walked along the bay, Michael stopped and turned to me. I've been thinking, he said, about us. My heart raced at his words. I can't forget what happened. But I don't want to let it define our future. What are you saying? I whispered. I'm saying maybe we could try again. Slowly, carefully. With everything we've learned. Tears filled my eyes. I'd like that more than anything. He pulled me into a gentle embrace. Our first since that terrible night at Blake's mansion. It felt like coming home. But also like starting something entirely new. We both knew it wouldn't be easy. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But we were different people now. Stronger, wiser, more aware. As we walked back along the water, hand in hand under the Bay Area stars, I realized something profound. Sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. Sometimes you have to face your worst mistakes to become the person you're meant to be. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, love is strong enough to survive even our darkest moments. Michael squeezed my hand gently. And I squeezed back. Both of us looking forward to whatever came next. Together. End.